Hi, you guys know me. My name's Michael. One of the nice things about being put into this group of other reporters is I got to learn a lot. I've been covering legal affairs for 6 or 7 years for Time magazine, but I've been brand new as a business reporter maybe since August. So I figured I'd come and talk to you about something I know even less about, which is being a Washington correspondent. But the reason I wanted to talk about that is I think it really it's okay, good. It really builds on what my colleagues talked about. If you think about what we were asked to do, I think, and the reason they put us in together is we were all sort of niche reporters. We wrote about business or housing or what have you. And that's what I want to talk to you about a little bit. Most people think of Washington reporters as generalists. And even though I work for the business page, I'm pretty much a generalist. Since I've been here in August, I've written about antitrust cases in the airline industry, to the housing debate, to Ted Cruz reading Green Eggs and Ham. I mean, you name it. And certainly, as some of you would agree, once you're here in Washington, you're basically, any day you could throw a dart, and that's what you're supposed to be an expert in. So, but what I'd like to suggest is that all of us are actually expert reporters in one common way, which is what we write about Washington. And we all may have a specific focus or angle that we want to make our own as being Washington reporters, but there's somebody out in the country that's reading you that comes to you specifically to understand what's going on in a specific place in the world, which is, obviously the capital of the U.S. And so they're going to trust your byline, they're going to get to know your byline, or they'll go somewhere else and read that byline. And so what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is my journey from specialty reporter at the Dallas Morning News, where I wrote about transportation policy and politics for 6 years. Got to the point where I was sort of one of those go-to people. If you were a lawmaker in Austin or you were an engineer in Houston, you were going to read my blog. You're going to figure out what the Dallas Morning News was talking about transportation that day. For those of you who aren't interested in transportation, that will shock you because it sounds very dry. But actually, lots of people were interested in the billions of dollars of toll road finance and traffic, everything in between. So this last weekend, I was asked to fill in on the desk and kind of rewrite the weather story in Dallas. And it reminded me what it was like to be in a beat where you knew more than your sources. You actually were more knowledgeable in many cases than the sources. I'm in the opposite case now. I come here and I'm learning, and everybody I talk to knows a whole lot more than I do pretty much about everything except maybe journalism. Which will get me a cup of coffee. So I had that experience. I thought, oh yeah, that's what it's like to be that relied upon reporter, and of course that's what I'd like to get to here. And so what I want to talk to you a little bit about is the strategy of doing that. I started to realize at the Morning News that we had all these niche reporters, many of whom had their own blogs, their own personalities about very specific coverage areas. And they had attracted audiences that cared about that one thing. For me, it was transportation, but the aviation reporter has done a great job. Anybody in the country that's interested in airline business is interested in what he's writing. We have a reporter for real estate and housing and energy, all the things that you would think are important in Texas. And yet the newspaper did very little to monetize any of that. So we had this old school model where you have a big newspaper. We go out and attract our readers. They come to the site or pay a subscription, and they're distributed all over the place to these individual writers. That model is dying, as most of us know. I think what we are all being asked to do is instead individually go out and get our readers and bring it back to the mothership, so to speak, to grow that circulation, to make the newspaper or magazine more relevant. Meanwhile, that puts us in a much different position than we used to be. We actually become publishers in a sense. And if I had to say specifically what my sort of thesis is that we all need to start acting like publishers. So I had this idea that maybe there was a way to start thinking about being a journalism entrepreneur without having to leave your business, leave your company. If all the innovative and passionate people were going to leave mainstream media to go start their own thing, where was that going to leave the newspapers and television stations and magazines that I think are so important to our democracy? So I went to Stanford for a year to study entrepreneurialism, to study storytelling, and basically just take a break, all those things together. And I came back with the idea that you don't have to leave to be an entrepreneur. So here I am. I got a new job, which they sent me here. And I'm thinking, I'm going to give myself a few months to figure out what I'm doing, which I'm still doing. And then I'm going to start thinking about, well, how can I be a publisher of my own brand? Even though I'm working for the Dallas Morning News and get a salary, and I'm not going to monetize my own, I'm not going to be paid by what I put out. I'm going to start acting like a publisher because I think there is a community of readers that are very interested in precisely what I'm in a position to tell them. And some of the things that my colleagues were showing you, the specifics, you start looking at all the tools available to you to pick the portfolio of things that you're going to be knowledgeable about in a way that other people will find valuable. So to me, the second insight, besides thinking like a publisher, was to realize what the product was. And the product is the audience, our readers that come to us, either because we're bringing them or because they happen to come to the publication, is what is valuable in this whole enterprise. And so I'm starting to think, okay, what I need to do is start building a readership, which is in fact a product that comes to me for information they can't get anywhere else, or they can't get it in the same way they get it from me that brings them back. I had this previously, but I wasn't thinking like that, so it was just sort of by default, and there wasn't any sort of thinking like a publisher involved at all. But there ought to be, and if just for sake of simplicity, if you imagine suddenly your job went away, and somebody said, we'll give you 6 months of salary if you'll just keep doing what you do, but you're going to have to build a business model out of it. Some of these things that I'm going to talk about are things that you would do to try to build a business model. And I think the switch I'll make at the end is you don't have to leave to do any of this. You can do this wherever you're at, and it'll make you more valuable, hopefully make your publication more successful, and build your audience, which is, I think, what we're all here for. I think like a publisher, I started thinking, okay, if the audience is the product, what can I do to build that audience? Well, the old school way, and it's certainly the most important thing still, is to do good content, good journalism, good writing, good photography, whatever it is that you do. And that will be my, obviously my top goal. But there's all kinds of other things. If you look at all the niche products around the country, there's some of them doing very well, some aren't. They're developing other lines of business. And it's all centered around developing an audience and the mentality that the audience is the product. In Texas, there's a publication called Texas Tribune, which has become very successful, mostly through fundraising. But the sort of secret to its success is not so much the fact that it has its readership, which is maybe 60, 70,000 readers a day, I think. What they end up having is this super engaged, the readers that they have are super engaged, so they're able to have events. They have like $1 million a year event business. And what that is they put on conferences and put on breakfasts. They have the Tribune talk. So every 2 weeks they'll have somebody sit down for lunch with the publisher or one of the editors, and they'll talk, and they'll invite an audience, and they'll pay to come see it. And the reason I'm mentioning that is it's not that I think all of us would start having lunches and stuff, but if you start thinking, what are they actually paying? Why do they come do that? They're interested in what they write, but they're interested in the topic enough that they want to come meet other people who are interested in what they're interested in. So some of the ways we could do this without actually, charging a fee and becoming a conflict for our employers, would start thinking, well, who's interested in what I do that's that's related to Texas, that's in D.C.? Would they be interested in coming to lunch with me once a month? Could I get the paper to host a brunch or a coffee or what have you, to start building an audience so that those people will go back and say, I'm going to read Lindenberger on Texas business or whatever every time. So that's one example. Another example is there's the audience itself becomes valuable because they start having value to each other. And I think that's something else that I'll be playing with in the next 6 months. I guess what I wanted to just end with really is to say, if I could leave you with anything, is a different way of thinking about what we do. And it's like the same things that have always been important to us as journalists are still important. But we can't rely on, C-SPAN or CNN or Money or wherever we're working to bring us our audience for the foreseeable future. We got to go out and build our own audience, and that's going to make us more valuable both to our employers and should we have to change jobs someday for ourselves. And these tools that were talked about here about business reporting are just sets of tools, one sort of toolbox of things that you can start saying, well, what could I use that I could do easier than anybody that's reading me could do? And therefore, I could spend a little bit of time and save them a lot of time. Or give them a lot of value for a little bit of effort on my part. And that becomes a value proposition. And I think it means that they'll read you more often. If we were standalone publications, it might mean revenue, but it certainly will mean loyalty as readers. And I think that will help us be more successful in what we do. So anyway, that's the experiment I'm launching. You're welcome to join me if you like. So.